Hello and welcome to this episode. This is about processes. This is part of our Let's Talk About series. And today we've got Rob Walker from Green Robin Solutions. Welcome, Rob.
Hello.
Um, so those of you that know me will know that I love a good process and I love to define things and to have structure and organization. And we found Rob, who's probably more excited about processes than I am. So we thought we'd have a chat with him today. Um, Rob, let's just dive straight into it. Processes as a word often puts people off, but we all have processes whether we like it or not. What can you tell us what a process actually is?
Okay, so there's the dictionary kind of definition, which is a series of activities that all act together for a particular outcome. That sounds really kind of scary and robotic, but actually, if you think about a process, everything we do, from brushing our teeth to making a cup of tea to driving a car, there are certain steps that we need to undertake. And actually, if you lay them out in a logical order, you'll see that step one leads into step two, and step two into step three, and that becomes a process.
Because I think the word, as you said in the question, the word puts a lot of people off because they think it's this big scary thing. But actually, if you haven't defined a process that's immaterial, you still have one. Everyone has a process, whether you've thought about it or not. It's just the natural way that you do things.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's one of the important things is actually when we're good at something, it becomes second nature. Uh, I mean, we've all kind of started off as newborn babies at one point, and we didn't know how to walk. And through trial and error and observation, we understood that actually there are a series of actions and activities that are taken to enable us to walk. And that's the same with anything. So the more you become familiar with a process or an activity, then it becomes easier for you to do it, and then it moves into the subconscious, and then you don't really think about the way you're doing it is as easy to do. You just kind of go with the flow, that there are niggles, but you can deal with it.
But there's a danger involved in that as well, isn't there? Because a lot of companies that I speak to have kind of fallen into their process rather than sat down and decided on the process. And you kind of go with the easiest thing at that time. But there's obviously importance. I mean, how important is it to actually sit down and decide your process rather than just letting the process fall into place?
I think it's hugely important. You know, yes, you're right. When a business starts, there is that sort of trial and error, and you'll set upon a version of the process which may look different to your very first one. But then, if the business is going to grow, it's understanding. I suppose I would look at it as, if you're going to enter into a new market, or offer a new service, that new service needs to fit into your existing processes. So therefore, actually, if you take a step back to say, right, how does my business operate today? What are the activities? Who does what in which teams? Then that enables you to create that baseline view, and then say, oh, if we were to offer a new service, who would be impacted by that? Would there be new teams that we need to create, or would existing people in our existing teams have to do more? So it's hugely important to understand it. And even similarly, when someone goes to sell their business, if they've become a very much a figurehead, so almost like a Steve Jobs type person in their industry, being able to articulate the value of your business based on how long it takes you to do something, and in essence the processes and all things around that, actually enable you to stand up and say how valuable your business is.
Well, it's also a case of the process that you, because the process isn't necessarily just for part of the business. It's right from the time that you meet your client all the way through to whatever you've delivered that you promised you deliver, and client support and everything. So sometimes the way you undertake the process at the beginning can have a huge impact at the end, but you're not necessarily seeing why you need to do something at the beginning of the process. At the beginning, but you only realize why it's important at the end. So it's important to actually sit down and plan the whole route. So what you do at one stage will affect what happens later on.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, in larger organizations, they probably become a little bit more guilty of it. But they will hire people and only really give them a line of sight that shows them where they sit. And the problem with that is there isn't any relativity. So that person who sits in the middle of the process won't necessarily understand the importance of what they're doing relative to the next person.
Yeah.
Smaller businesses, yes, you could say that isn't as necessary, but it's definitely something that needs to be thought of, particularly when you're offering, for a lot of businesses, we competing on price is a zero-sum game. There'll always be someone there cheaper than you or fast or whatever the metrics be, but your quality is your marker, and therefore being able to know that your quality of what you're promising your customers when you first reach them and what you're giving them at the end matches up is hugely important.
Definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned about larger and smaller businesses, because that's something I get told quite a bit is smaller businesses don't need processes. They're for larger businesses. But I mean, that's, from my point of view, just totally not true. What do you have to say about that?
I think, yeah, I get a similar thing. I get that when a business owner starts a business day one, if they've come from a large organization, sometimes they're overwhelmed by all of the different things they need to do and then become accustomed to it. So, it's like wearing different hats. So, 1 second you're the marketeer, the next second you're the dispatch person, including the person making cups of tea. So therefore the visibility of the processes in a smaller business disappear. It just becomes, I'm doing activity A and that's feeding into activity B. But it's still hugely important, because if you are going to grow, or if something goes wrong, it's having that, it's trying not to keep everything in your head as a note to remember. I mean, a lot of things, and it's not my favorite of things to talk about, but when small businesses don't have things written down, at the very least, irrespective of a process or something, is the fact that if you become ill or something, who's going to carry on your work? How's your business going to survive? If you don't have those records there, you're opening yourself up to quite a lot of risk at a time when you need the most for your support network to be able to take on activities for you. So say you're in the middle of delivering a big piece of work for someone. If you've got that written down as to what it is you do, and where your client data is, not giving them access to it, obviously, but telling important people where stuff is, then you can enable them to say to your clients that Rob is ill at the moment. So it's hugely important, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll get on to writing stuff down in a minute, because that's obviously where Spreadsheet Solutions will come in. But first of all, tell us about Green Robin Solutions. What do you actually do to help business owners with their processes?
So I help businesses in sort of three key kind of areas of growth. So one is when a business owner is starting off and they reach that point of being busy, there is a golden window between you being busy and too busy. And in that window, you start thinking about, if I hire someone else, what can they do? But also another part is actually, do they understand what it is the process is? What are they going to be doing for you to give you capacity back? Second one is then when, I think it was a team of three, the three wise people in a room, they've all, say, working in a similar field. So there might be techie people, or there might be lawyers, and they reach a point of growth and they go, well, I need someone to help me. That's a journey then of moving from worrying about the numbers and i.e. the detail, to worrying about the MI, management information. So again, that's the process. And the final one is when a business owner wants to sell, it's helping them to define that. But my steps to helping people get that is around understanding and defining and bringing out from the subconscious what the steps in each activity are in a logical way, so they can go, okay, these are the activities, these are what I would do in the future, these are the bits I don't need to do.
So you're not, I mean, a lot of people might be scared off, as you said, by processes, thinking you're going to come in and give them all sorts of documentation to sign. but actually what you're doing is helping them through the process of thinking about where their business is, where they want to get it to, and how best to actually do that. So it's not as scary as what a lot of people think.
No, no, absolutely not. I mean, for anyone watching this, I'm not an expert in your business. You are an expert. No, I don't. Great respect. I don't want to be an expert in what you do. But where I come along and ask you questions around the process enables you to think about that and sort of say, yeah, actually, I do that for a reason, Rob. Or now we've had that conversation. Yeah, maybe it was once right to have this process or this check in this part of the process. Maybe it does need to change now.
Yeah. Well, now this is the next question. This is where, in an ideal world, someone would have gone through using your services and understand what their process is. This is where they'll probably move over to me. But how important is it to firstly have a defined process, but then obviously to have the right tools in place to actually help you to stick to that process, monitor the process, and report on it? Because it's no good. You obviously set this in place to do something, but you need to now monitor whether that's working and have the right tools so that you can actually do the process as you've set it out. Because the worst thing you can do is decide that's how we're going to do it, and then get a software package, for example, that does it this way, because it doesn't align with what you want. I mean, how important is all of that to, the next stage, as it were, to be able to make sure you actually stick to that process?
Yeah, absolutely. The method I follow or been taught in is a thing called Lean, and it comes from Toyota and how they build cars, and it's spread out into numerous other industries. But a lot of it is around quality and having the right checks and the right balances in place. So that when you change a process, that you can then, through these checks and balances, see that not only your number of clients are going up, but if you're seeing unexpected factors, like it's taking you longer to do each step, then you're understanding, okay, there's an issue that we need to reinvestigate and focus on. And also, it's hugely important to have the right tools in place. A lot of sort of stuff that we start off doing, we do, in basic things like basic Excel, but actually it's really time consuming. And there are people such as yourself, Richard, who actually help give back time to business owners and their teams by actually putting in smarter solutions that mean that weekly check isn't done manually and isn't taking half a day on a Friday when everyone wants to go home and there's quality issues on a Monday. Your solutions actually help people to automate that so that by Monday morning, the business owner has got a really clear view of what the sales were last week, what the in-flight product or whatever they do is in going in, and other important things like customer feedback, supplier issues, all of these things a business owner needs to know so they can make valuable decisions moving to the next stage of the business or the next day in business.
Because I mean, when I first met you and we were chatting about Bobby's processes and how the whole thing works, so one thing I often come across is people saying to me, "Can you make me a spreadsheet or solution to do X, Y, and Z?" And my first question to them is, "What is your process?" Because I don't want to make something that does something different to what they want. I want to sit down, understand what they're trying to achieve, and I'll often ask them, "What happens before the spreadsheet? What do you want the spreadsheet to do? And then what happens afterwards?" So I know that I'm continuing the right process of what they've been doing. And the surprising truth to me is when I ask that question, I watch the panic set in as they have to think about what they do. And then I'll ask them, "But you're having to think about what you do. Have you ever sat down and defined this and decided what to do? Or has this just happened?" And 9 times out of 10, well, this is just the way we've always done it. And it's quite scary to think that there's been no planning or anything involved. And sometimes I actually have to turn people away because I said, "I can't make something for you because you don't have a process." And I don't want to be the one to define, as you say, that aspect of their business, because it might then throw everything else out.
And actually what you said is, it really reminds me of of an important thing. At the moment, as business owners are reading, they're hearing about automation, robotics, AI, and sometimes, admittedly, when I've seen it or heard about it, it fills me with kind of dread that certain people are just automating things, and I would almost sort of say, without sort of further thought as to, as you've said, why am I even doing this activity? Am I producing this report because a customer once 10 years ago complained? Have I therefore spent the last 10 years overproducing on something that isn't actually even a requirement? And then going back to your piece around the articulating it, is that actually, yes, if you understand the process, you can understand where you need to automate it, or whatever solution you need to put in place. The worst place to be would be that you spend a lot of money automating different parts, and they're fighting against each other for resources. So I've seen this in a previous life I had in banking, that there was a push to automate a part within the business or within the flow. And I inadvertently asked a very awkward question, which was, if we're making this quicker here, have we told the person in the next step that there's going to be more stuff coming their way? And it was a kind of a look of, oh dear, because actually that's where you need to understand the entire flow of where you're going to do stuff. Actually, is it going to be of benefit, or are you going to just make stuff worse in a different part of the business?
That's exactly it, because as you say, each one flows into the next. I know it's obviously a silly example, but it's kind of like putting in quicker conveyor belts at the supermarkets at the checkout. But if the person scanning the items can't keep up, it's pointless putting faster conveyor belts. And it's that really in a business, and businesses often don't think about those kind of things.
And adding to that point very quickly is that you need to also speak to your customers at the very end. They may not want you to, for stuff to arrive very, very quickly, because they may use it in a certain way. And actually, that's where your conversation with the external world is equally important. Say, if we make this quicker, would it work for you? Or are you going to end up with inventory that you need to store? So it's really important. I loved your point about the conveyor belt. It's so true.
Well, I mean, now that you mentioned about asking your clients, there's another bit of a thing I've found, is that business owners will very often try and determine their process without consulting staff. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that a business is a democracy, because it's not. You as a business owner have to make those decisions. But the number of business owners who try to make those calls without actually sitting down with the staff saying, well, what do you find an issue with your job? What do you struggle with? What could you have help with? And I find that's very seldom that conversation takes place. But I think that's also vital.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. You're right. It's not a democracy. But businesses employ really smart people, and if you use your team effectively and give them the tools and the confidence to identify problems, and not only the problem, but allow them to highlight the possible solutions. They may come back to you with, oh, I think I can stop doing this activity. And if as a manager you understand the importance of it, you can say, well, no, we can't get rid of it, but maybe it's clunky, or maybe, yes, it needs to be something that you don't need to do. But the power of ideas, I mean, that's where a lot of, when I'm speaking to my clients, I ask silly questions all day. But that's because I'm in essence paid to, because I will be helping a client to solve a problem around their customer engagement. And I will be sort of thinking, where was I yesterday? Oh yes, I went to the supermarket. How do they measure the engagement? Oh, well, they ask their customers, or whatever the thing may be. So it's all about sort of harnessing, I suppose, to use the big data concept. There's so much information out there. We just need to ask your team.
Because I mean, I know I've got my own business, and so do you. But I mean, I've worked in jobs before that, as I'm sure you did as well. And I recall some of my old jobs thinking, what are they on? Because, you know, they never once asked us to staff, how do you think we can improve things? And they didn't actually know what we were doing. And half the time we were making up our own processes because they didn't actually give us any guidelines as to how it should be done or what should be done. So you end up either having staff kind of going rogue on you, or you end up with a situation where they're following what you've told them to do, which is wrong. And you, both ways aren't being particularly productive. I think involving the staff, getting, if need be, getting some professional help like yourself to actually put it all together, and then coming up with that plan, and then having everyone stick to the plan because everyone's invested in that plan. I mean, that's really the way it should happen. Any other way, and you are basically opening yourself up to potential problems.
Yeah, usually. I mean, it's funny. I was at an event recently. I was talking about, it was related to process, but I was talking about procedure documents, and this person was extremely happy about how they're constantly updating these documents, and they're very prescriptive. And I suppose my question then was, maybe my view is I'm willing to be challenged, but I kind of went, but procedure documents are a learning tool. They should articulate most of the process to a person. But also, if you're overly prescriptive in what you write down, the thing about, like, it's like, say, your role is to paint a wall blue, and there's a procedure document, say, paint the wall blue, and each time that it turns out green. That you remember yourself, say, well, I followed you every single step. And they can evidence and you do it, but that's where there's an element of saying, okay, this is the majority of the stuff. This is where I'll put in the kind of critical information, and then engaging your staff to say, how do you think we should do it? What should we do better? So that you don't have people going rogue, and people as a manager and as individuals doing a task, you can measure your performance and your understanding and your growth.
Because I think staff are far more likely to follow the process that's been set out for them if they've had some kind of input into it.
Yeah, exactly. There's that feeling of ownership and engagement, and we've probably seen it in our daily lives that we've interacted with an organization where you see staff are disengaged. Now, I'm not saying that they have got process that are very prescriptive or there's a complete lack of process, but it is kind of clear that if you have got people engaged in an organization and there's that feeling of engagement, they're going to be far more likely to be there for, one, longer, so your staff retention goes down, and two, they can measure their growth, and three, you've got control of your business.
Most definitely, yeah. Now tell me, we've obviously discussed about business processes, and it's not something you define 1 year and leave for the next 40. I mean, how often should your processes be reviewed?
So, to be fair, it's very difficult to say different processes should have different reviews. I would say personally on an every 6 month basis. The reason, and I would say also, it's not just picking up a document and dusting it off and saying, well, I've checked it, great. But actually it's around following the process and using, say, if you've got a procedure document or whatnot, and following it through yourself as a business owner when you've delegated someone else, and say, okay, is this still right? Because also checks and balances and data that they're getting from it, which come in from your solution, the solutions you provide rather, enable people to see where things have changed. And then, you almost end up at that critical point of the review. It's like a decision tree or a decision question is, okay, my outcome is different to my procedure or to my process. Which one is wrong? Is it that my business has grown and therefore I need to update my process? Or is it that actually something has gone lost in translation and my process is still correct, but we've not been following it? But yes, I think it depends, but I'd say every 6 months is probably a good benchmark. And then certain things may go into annual, other things may go quarterly or monthly.
I mean, this just reminds me of a spreadsheet I made once for someone, very, very simple solution, but just all it did was it took them through each stage of their project. that they defined how long each stage should take, and they were just monitoring. So it wasn't to chase up or check up on anybody. They were just putting in the dates when each stage was done. And after a few months of data collection, they looked at the spreadsheet and they saw that they were constantly late on one particular aspect. And that then enabled them to ask the question, why? And actually, they hadn't allowed enough time for it. So when they were telling the clients it'll be ready in so many days, they weren't being ready consistently because of one aspect that was taking too long. And then you can look at it and go, can we change that part to get it done quicker? Or do we have to tell the client there's a longer lead date? And as soon as they started adding a few days onto their lead dates, they had much happier clients. They had much happier staff. They were all happy because there wasn't so much rushing around. And it's a simple solution, but unless you actually do the exercise of establishing how it's working, you're never going to know what the problem is.
Yeah, and actually, what you've said reminds me of well, more through marriage than dealing with myself. But I understand the legal profession that there's in essence an industry kind of problem whereby time is being written off, and what that can come down to, and not every situation I appreciate, is the fact that people are keen to get the business in, so they will give a price, and then that price is agreed with the client. Now, that means that even if you have severely underestimated your time and effort, you will therefore lose, you won't be able to be remunerated for all of your effort. Whereas actually, when you put in things like the thing you just described, you can actually more confidently say to your clients and prospective clients going, it will take me 2 months to do this because I've got a baseline or I've done this numerous times. And then when someone say, well, someone else can do this for half that, then you say, well, that's going back to our point and compete on quality, not price. So, well, I'm sure there are other people who do for quicker, but actually this is why we pride ourselves and where we deliver our service.
Exactly. Well, last question for you, Rob. And we've probably covered a lot of this, but I'll ask it anyway, just so we can do a recap. What are some of the benefits of having an effective process in your business?
Okay. To be honest, I'm going to say it's around disorder. I think actually can create anxiety, and if you are managing people, and if you're a people person, and your business relies on people to undertake stuff, if things aren't written down, people can feel that the goalposts are being moved constantly. So anxiety is one sort of thing that goes up, and if you write it down and remove it, it goes away. Second one is your ability to grow and understand actually where am I going and what am I doing and am I doing it right. Again, if you've got a baseline view of the organization and where you want to get to and what the good future looks like, you then understand how you're going to get there. With processes, and if you go to change something, it's not at the point of go live, it'll be a switch. But actually, you've got to tell your customers that you're going to change something. People have seen it numerous times with their online banking may be down. It's because it's been a project or a process change, which means that the bank has had to look at how they do stuff currently and make changes. But they tell you in advance. Yes, there's frustrations when people say, "Oh, my banking is down," but actually, no. Most of the time, they'll say, "Between these hours and this hour, the computer you won't be able to use it." So managing expectations of your clients is hugely important as well, and also then you process around gathering their feedback and engaging them on your growth story.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Rob. Much appreciated. That's all we've got time for today. So, yeah, I hope these people have learned some things and are people not sitting down thinking about their processes. Because as we said at the beginning, if they haven't actually defined them, then they're just doing default, and that's not really what you want to be doing. So, yeah, hopefully it's given them some food for thought.
Yeah, hopefully, and obviously, as people have met us, even if they meet us in person or if they feel after this they want to send us an email, feel free. We're always happy to have a chat. I know both of us are interested in process.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again, Rob.
No worries. Thank you very much.